Hello fellow developers, welcome back to the TechRakshit. In this video, let's discuss JavaScript execution context, global execution context, local execution context, and all about it. Stay tuned. So you can think of this JavaScript execution context as a big box like I have drawn in the green. This execution context contains two components. The first component is the memory component and the second component is the code execution component. Now, in this memory component, what actually happens, the memory of all the variables are allocated. Let's say it can be num1 with some value, then number 2 with some another value. All these are variables. It also gets the function. The allocation of the memory happens here with all the parameters, with the results and everything. All the variables and functions gets the memory from this component. Then after the memory allocation is done, all the codes are executed line by line. So this is the thread of execution. So in the memory component, all the variables gets their memory, and in the code section or the thread of execution component, all the codes are executed, and this is execution context. When some other function gets called here, then one small execution context is created for that particular function, and that small execution context is called the local context. And the big box, the parent thing, this is called the global. We shall be discussing this with another example, and let's come back to the example. So for example, I have this code which is variable number 1, number 2, then there is this function and there is this result. Technically I have 1, 2, 3 and 4 variables in this global execution context. Why am I saying this is a global execution context? Because in this function code there will be one more local execution context created inside this function. So that is why I am calling the parent as the global execution context. So let us now understand how this thing will be working and how this thing will be executed in the JavaScript thread. So here for the code that I have shown, first all the variables will be allocated some memory in this memory allocation phase, and with this special keyword undefined. All the variables during the memory allocation phase will be given this value undefined. Undefined is not defined, and in JavaScript undefined is a special character and special keyword. Also this add variable, because this is our function, is allocated with the text, exact text of the function, and the result is also defined undefined. Now during the code execution part, these undefined values are now replaced. So first line is executed, so num1 is now replaced with the value 5, then num2 is replaced with the value 2, and then when it encounters this function call which is add, then what happens, one more small local execution context is created, and in this execution context num1 and num2 we are passing that as the argument. Now inside this function you can see there are two parameters, one is a and the second is b. So in this execution context, inside this memory component of this particular local context, a and b is allocate some memory. So initially it will be undefined, b will be undefined, and when we are calling this in the code execution part of this local context or the execution context of this add function, then num1 and num2 values, which is 5 and 11 respectively, will be allocated the value. So now a will be 5, then b is 11, and it is simply executing return a plus b. So this a value comes from this memory and b value comes from this memory, so 5 plus 11, the return will be 16. And when it returns the execution to the global context, then this local context is destroyed, and we are simply coming back to the global context. Inside this global context we are simply logging console.log, and we are getting the printed result. And that is how JavaScript code is executed inside the engine or inside the browser. So you have to remember one thing. First, the memory allocation is happening, and then the code is executed. Thank you very much.